So we're going to be talking about Zoho campaigns, and we're talking a little bit about types of campaigns, and then we'll spend most of our time in a demo, and I'll have some best practices at the end. So basically, I think one of the great things about email campaigns or email marketing in general is that it's super flexible. And this is why I think it tends to be something that we all invest in pretty heavily. There is a whole bunch of different types of campaigns that you can be running. Drip campaigns, re-engagement, newsletter updates, those are a few. So using it for promotional pieces with social media and events, also using it to do form campaigns so that we can get better data from our customers to get it into the CRM to help clean up and enrich the CRM for what we need. There's a whole bunch of different ideas, and obviously people are using it to a bunch of different effects. I think one of the most important things about email marketing is not spamming people. So in general, we want to operate on the basis of consent, and we want to make sure that we are respecting people's preferences and privacy. We generally don't want to badger people, and we definitely want to make sure that our lists are clean and that they have engaged people on it. If we're spamming, if we are buying lists, it's very difficult to do that. And it also creates problems for you with your sender reputation, which is going to land more of your emails in spam. Something that I'll talk about a little bit later as well is some of the complexities around sender reputations, domain reputations. These are not easily fixable if they are bad, because you get a new one. Well, you don't have a reputation now. It's kind of like a line of credit. You have no credit history, so we don't trust you. And so that continues to be an issue. And when I say we, I don't mean Zoho. I mean the overall kind of email world, right? So spam is obviously a major issue. Generally speaking, it's best to try to give audiences what they want. Even in the case of a situation where we're trying to promote an event, obviously there's a value to an event, but even in the case of trying to update your information, usually it's being couched in some kind of way, hey, to better serve you, to make sure that your billing process goes more smoothly when you renew later. We want to make sure we have the right address for you. There's a lot of things we can do to make all of the emails we send be value-oriented. But that means, we have to kind of sometimes put on our hats to figure out what is the value proposition that we're trying to push. So I'm going to now just hop over into campaigns and just kind of, click around and show you some stuff. Basically, when we're in campaigns, the fundamental kind of module that's arguably the most important is going to be starting with our contacts. And our contacts in campaigns are always organized into different kinds of lists. There's the ability to go beyond that and to put tags in lists and to segment lists and everything like that. But generally speaking, we are always wanting to think about the audience that we're trying to send an email to in terms of a list that we put them in. These lists we can use or we can create by, uploading like a CSV file into campaigns. We can run integrations with things like CRM to bring data across so we have leads. We have different kinds of contacts. We can take contacts and use a special filter on like closed won deals. So that way we're pulling in people who are our customers, and we can create then a customers list. We can put forms on various web pages, and we have maybe some kind of lead gen process that we're running that we're going to move over into CRM later once they're sufficiently warmed. So there's a whole bunch of different kinds of ways we can approach it, but fundamentally, the concept of a list is really important. In terms of managing these lists, one thing that we can do is we can move people between the lists as we need to. So for example, we have a contact that is in a particular list because, for example, they live in California, right? So we have them in this kind of California list, and we send California-based promotions to this list. We send them, like this gentleman over here does, a form and say, hey, can you update your billing information for us? When they update the form, they now say they're living in Nebraska. That updates the CRM. Now suddenly when that sync happens, this person is no longer in California. The sync can move someone across, but we could also have like workflow rules also that work in campaigns for different kinds of situations that could move them around as well. So that's about kind of managing our lists and making sure that whoever we think is in this is actually there. So practicing what we call like list hygiene, where we go through and make sure that people are who we think they are, and that we're removing people that really are not engaged anymore and putting them maybe in a non-engaged list, which a workflow rule will help us do that. That's how we can keep making sure that we're sending good emails and that the metrics we're getting and the feedback we're getting from our emails are insightful and usable. One of the big issues too is, just I'll say about lists, is if our lists are a mix of people who are engaged, not engaged, it's a list we haven't sent an email to in quite a while, we don't have a regular cadence of emails going to them, it's very hard to then even look at the reports that are in campaigns, which is really kind of the most important part of, email marketing, which is being able to see, well, this isn't a very impressive campaign, but, how many of them did we deliver? How many bounces? How many unique opens were there, etc. This company's starting very small. They got one guy, and they're sending those emails really well. Very clean list here, right? But in terms of making sure that those lists are in good shape, if it's a big mix of people in the list and we're not really warming them up, we're not very consistent with them, how do we really know what it means when someone has opened an email? How do we really use that information to move forward with it? We have to have some kind of standards that are in place for who is in our list and how we're working with them if we're going to really be able to use these reports effectively. So lists, we're starting to see some of the different reports that are available. Let's go ahead and look at campaigns in the sense that we can create campaigns. There are a bunch of different kinds of campaigns that we can create. We can send our nicely designed HTML email campaigns. We can send plain text, which just looks like a normal email. And we can also send, like this guy had said, I've mentioned before, like a form campaign where we're trying to get someone to click a link that opens a form so they can fill out some information for us that is going to get collected in a database somewhere. We can send out surveys. We can send out, all sorts of different kinds of things here. One type of campaign that we have is A/B campaigns. A/B test campaign, very simple. You want to test the subject line of your email. You send subject line A to 50%. You send subject line B to 50%. After a certain threshold of the test is reached, whichever one is more successful gets sent to the rest, right? Or rather, there's a sample that is being split, and that's how it works, right? So you can do this obviously in email marketing. So Zoho PageSense allows you to do this kind of thing on your website, for example, regardless of where you're hosting it. So it could be on WordPress, it could be on Wix, Squarespace, Zoho sites, wherever. PageSense is able to create kind of an additional page that looks like your page, host it in PageSense, and can create that A/B test when people visit it. So a lot of different A/B testing functionality in the Zoho suite. I'm not going to get into anything here because, again, we have some idea of how this works, but this is just one more kind of campaign that we can run. So when we go ahead and are working on a campaign, we'll go and just do something simple. We want to name it something. And in this case, the kind of demo account that I'm operating off of is a design firm. And so this is going to be their monthly newsletter, which they call, the company's called Out of Line Design. And this is called their, In the Loop newsletter for June. And, we can give it a topic of some kind. It might be hard for you to see this. And there's a few different kinds of things that are in here. So this is going to be an out of line update, and we can proceed. So at this point, we can add a subject line. Generally speaking, best practices on subject lines is to certainly avoid any spam words, right? So any of the kinds of typical spam words we're used to seeing in our email that make us also get away from them and think this is going to be something that I shouldn't open at all. We definitely want to avoid that. It's best to be descriptive and not too salesy. And if possible, it's always good to try to personalize things. The way that we personalize content in campaigns, whether it's a subject line or the email, is using something that we call merge tags. And so basically what we're able to do is to say, I want to insert the contact's first name and put it here. It puts in this little bit of code,
And what it basically is saying is insert the first name or the word customer. The tip here is if you're going to use the merge tag, make sure you have the data for everybody in your list, because we like to imagine that personalization is this, oh, wow, they know my name. We obviously know that it's a computer that does this, but the facade really fails when you get an email that says, hello, customer, right? So that is a big step in the wrong direction. So if you don't have the data, that's fine. If you have it and you're confident, make sure to do it. That's always a good thing. People like hearing their name. The other thing that I think people seem to really love are the little emojis. This is probably the single most important feature that Zoho has ever built.
Pre-header. So like when you go into Gmail, for example, and you're reading it, you'll see that there's a subject line that you can read, and you can see there's some content that is kind of previewed for you. That is the pre-header text. So what you can do is basically put this into your email, and that way the clients that pick this up, they'll be able to feed in a good kind of starting message that's clean and enticing for someone to open their email. And it doesn't affect any of your actual content when they open it. So, in this issue, let's say this is called like the color issue, right? Right. And we'll say color is really important to design, ... And we'll move forward. When we go with a sender, we add sender details, which is basically, who is the email from? Way back when, a long time ago, I was talking to somebody who worked at Twitter, and before it was X, I still call it Twitter, but they worked at Twitter, and they said that they were running a bunch of emails to a whole bunch of people, and they used the name Mark for a while. And then one day they switched to Lisa and tried that, and that had a significant improvement. I don't know why, right? They didn't know why either. There's a lot of weird, peculiar things that can happen, but that's just an example of things that you can keep testing and keep working on. And I think that in terms of testing, an important point is made that since you can test pretty much anything with an email, whether it's Mark or Lisa or a subject line or the content or a link or a button color or whatever, it's best to try to do it in as programmatic a way as possible. If you're constantly changing everything, you're not really going to learn anything, right? And if you are able to say, okay, well, where is maybe the best place to start, and let's spend some time on that. If we feel we're pretty good there, then let's move on to the next and work with that. So trying to think out that kind of progression is how you can use these features effectively. Otherwise, it's just kind of big changes, and we really can't make any correlations. Obviously, we can include, reply to addresses and all sorts of cool stuff like that.
And then we get into contact scoring. So, for example, this is just, more cool little things that you can do here with trying to understand what's going on with your emails.
You're able to build some scoring rules and conditions in here that can give your campaigns a specific score that get assigned to your contact. This is a good way maybe if you're trying to do really basic like lead warm-up, for example, or you're wanting to say, who are my most engaged customers that I'm inviting to this event? Who's really seeming to open all of the emails? Who's really seeming to be connected with our promotion? Something like this could be really helpful for then just more detailed and targeted surveying. For example, if I knew, hey, there's someone in this room for Zoholics, they opened every email, they were so excited, they loved all our messaging. It's like, maybe I want to talk to them and figure out why was that working for you? What was going well? What kind of customer are you? And maybe that gives me a better idea of how to segment something in the future or whatever. So all sorts of different ways we can use these kinds of scoring features. And once we're able to also score things, we can also set up response actions. So for example, if we know someone's clicked a specific link in an email, in our email, we could add them to a different list. We could invoke a workflow. We could remove a tag, add a tag. There's all sorts of different little things that we can do. So we'll go ahead and move forward now into the content. Once we get in here, there are some pre-designed templates. realistically, some of the pre-designed templates you kind of look at sometimes and you go, I'm not sure this is really what I want. One thing I'll say is you can always swap out images. You can always change a headline. You can use the general structure of it if you like that. So for example, maybe there is this, Valentine's email and you're like, well, this is wild. I'm not using this right now. But if you generally like the shape of it, the way that it is kind of just laid out, you can easily switch the colors. You can easily switch the image, and that can save you some time. Another neat thing are just some basic templates that just have some general outlines and structures, but you also can use saved templates as well for things that you know are going to be used often. This, for example, is a consent campaign that makes sure that people that we want to basically bring into our newsletter are actually opting in, because we could always, anyone that we were to do business with, we could automatically just add them to the newsletter. But in the scope of trying to keep a clean list and make sure people actually want this, so we can track, is this content actually resonating with people? Is it actually providing value? We're going to want to make sure that they actually want it. And so we'll send that consent campaign. If they click it, this button, the little green button, then it will say, great, they opened it. Because they opened it, now add them to the list, right? So something like that we can do. So we'll go ahead and work from like a basic template, something that is very simple. And this brings up the HTML editor. We can swap out an image pretty easily. And in fact, we have a little library of images that we can pull from that we use regularly. We can add our big little header. We can add our company logo. Whoa, way too big. And then we can resize from here. As I mentioned as before, we can add merge tags, so that way we can insert that little bit of personalization. This brings up the big list of merge tags that we can use. Beyond this, we can add in video, we can add in more pictures, we can change the layouts, we can do all sorts of very nifty things, add social buttons, what have you. So anyways, as we're working on all of our content, we eventually get it to a point where we are comfortable with it, and we now need to move into a testing phase. Sometimes we can't always be sure of how everything is going to look, but if we're doing some of that testing, that can be pretty helpful. So once we send out those tests, we are good. One thing I'll definitely mention, especially with all these merge tags, what's one of the issues that you might run into is you send a test campaign with the little personalization. Personalization never seems to work. Why is that? Well, the test email doesn't have any personalization, so it won't work, right? So it's always going to have some of these weird little gaps. So try to think through some of those cases, and maybe that'll help avoid some stress. So that's the end, I think, for the demo for now. I wanted to just quickly get into a few more little points. When we are creating syncs in CRM, it's possible you can sometimes run into a little bit of an issue if you're also using marketing automation. So it's best to kind of try to pick a lane there. Marketing automation is generally best for leads and lead management and doing those kinds of tasks. But I just want to let you know that can sometimes be a minor thing that I've seen. Beyond that, when you're bringing over your links, you go to the contacts module, and in the top right, you have this sync ability. So this is after you've already made sure that your CRM and your campaigns count are connected, which is just one button in this little settings menu over here. But once you have this, you have a few options of syncing immediately, doing periodic syncs. You can choose the modules you want to bring the data across from, which can include custom modules in CRM. Name it something reasonable, add it to a mailing list. You can set up some other things. And then once you do this, you'll map your fields. And this is basically just saying information that's sitting on this record over here is named this. In campaigns, it's going to be named this, and we want to combine them. So that is something that you'll need to do. And if you're sending any data back from campaigns back to CRM, sometimes you need a multi-line field to be added to the contact record so it can house that information when it's coming back the other place. We always have to remember that when we're integrating data, it's kind of like we're taking something from one bucket and we're putting it in another bucket. And if we don't have a bucket or have a bucket that's properly labeled, we don't know where to put it, right? So that's kind of the whole mapping process here. Best practices for email deliverability. I don't have time to get into all of this, but what I will say, offer valuable content, practice consent-based marketing. Those things will go very far. Avoiding the spam phrases, like I said. Authenticating your domain. Make sure that your sender domain has a good reputation, warm up sender domains and IP addresses. Starts to get a little technical. Authenticating your domain. There's two major pieces to this. One of them is the sender policy framework. The other is domain keys, identified mail. These things basically make sure that email is legitimate, prevents spam, and protects against spoofing and phishing attacks. So when you get served a web page that looks like a page that you're familiar with, like your Facebook login, and you put in your information, it's a fake page and a hacker has just taken it. That's what that is. You can literally create these pages in 5 seconds, like 10 seconds. It's so easy to do these malicious things, so you have to be vigilant about all this. There's guides then available for GoDaddy, Cloudflare, WordPress, Wix, Squarespace, wherever you're hosting your domain. We have guides to help you do that. Beyond that, managing lists, I talked about this already, but don't buy them. Confirm your subscriptions, segment your lists. Removing groups and roles is a really good one. Groups and roles is like, sales@yourcompany.com, right? Who is sales@yourcompany.com? It could be 5 different people that have access to that. How do we know it's actually working then? And also, a lot of times people give these addresses because they don't want to give you your email address. So that's something. Like I have a fake email address, tayjunk91@gmail.com. Well, it's a real email address, but good luck getting a hold of me, right? It's going to just go there. It's like where the grocery store emails go, right? So people have all sorts of different ways of not giving you their information to still get something, and removing groups and roles can be pretty helpful. And that's about list hygiene and stuff. As far as content, 80% valuable, 20% promo, think mobile, the importance of hierarchy. When we say hierarchy, making sure that the most important things are at the top of the email, making sure there's a really clean and simple focal point or call to action, something that we're trying to drive the recipient to do. If we have 5 competing calls to action, if we're trying to get people to update their billing information and their phone number and their favorite color, what do you want me to do? Like, I have to click all these? I mean, what, right? So trying to break things down and make it very manageable for people, and having one clear action that you want people to do is always helpful. Personalization. And then as far as, improving, study your reports, test your assumptions, test one thing at a time, develop new segments, clean your list. That'll go a long way. So I think that's all the time that I have. Thank you, everybody.